Welcome back to Empire Builders. I'm talking with Chris Gray. This is the third and final part of our interview, and we are going to answer that burning question that I'm sure you have, why it's cheaper to own a Lamborghini than a BMW. And we're also going to talk about why Chris doesn't own his family home, and we'll talk about a few other hints and tips as well about how you can live the life of the rich and famous without being a multi-millionaire. All right, Chris, let's talk about cars. So 24, you got your hands on a Porsche to start with, and you got it for free. Explain how that works.
Yeah, it's a wonder. A free Porsche. What more could a boy want at that kind of age? So look, taking things back 20 years, we've said before that there's no education, there's no books, there's no nothing. The mortgage industry wasn't that advanced. I had basically bought my first property. I'd made a bit of money on it, and I saw an advert in the paper, and it said you can use your home equity to use for things like renovating your home or for buying a car. And I thought, well, that sounds interesting. I could do with one of those. And so I think my car at the time cost like £3,000 or £4,000. It was an absolute bomb. And so I rang up and I said, look, can I borrow £3,000 or £4,000 to upgrade my car? And they said, no, the minimum is £15,000. Now I bought a 100 grand property for 80,000. It's probably now worth 120,000 or something like that. And I said, well, look, if you're willing to lend me 15,000, I'm sure I could find a car for 15,000 rather than 4,000 or 5,000. And basically, my serviceability had gone up, my income had gone up, and so basically they were happy to lend money from the property to go and buy a car. But they said, you've got to prove how you're spending this money. We're not just going to give you a cheque. So I went down to the local Porsche garage, and obviously couldn't afford a new one. A new one would have been, God knows what, maybe 30 or 40,000 pounds. And I thought I was going to get an old beat-up black one, and there's a red convertible one that, sure, it was maybe 10 or 15 years old, but it was still a red convertible Porsche when you're 24. And long story short is I managed to refinance it. And so I couldn't afford the repayments on a car loan because they would get you to pay off 15 grand over 3 years. Whereas effectively by putting it on my mortgage, it would be amortized over 25 years, so the repayments were almost nothing. Now, when I say this story, the classic person will argue, yeah, but you've got debt on debt and you're just accumulating bad debt. But I said, yeah, but if I'd sold the property for, say, 120,000, I'd pay back my £70,000 loan, my mortgage, I'd pay back the 15, and I'm still sitting on 20 or 30 grand of profit. So rather than sell the house to get the cash and buy the car and have no appreciating asset, I've got the car, I've still got the house, and the house is still going up at 5 or 10 grand a month. So it's really, you can have your cake and you can eat it. And basically when I emigrated to Australia at 27, I basically sold the Porsche. I still got about 12 or 13,000 pounds or whatever the number was, and that funded my trip to Australia, but it was still free because by then the property was worth maybe 150, 160. So I'm very much a fan of, sure, there is bad debt that we talked about before, but if I've still got appreciating assets and I'm only spending a small proportion of my equity increase, who cares what I spend it on?
All right, then after that, you got a Ferrari as well, and then onto a Lamborghini. And so we're going to show a photo of that Lamborghini right now. There it is.
As you can see, I'm very subtle. I like to blend into situations. I don't like anyone knowing where I am.
All right, let's talk about the actual numbers, and we're going to flash those up on the screen as well. Walk us through these numbers, because we're going to prove to people why it's cheaper to own a Lamborghini than own a BMW. So what do the numbers actually tell us?
So it was basically along the lines of the Porsche. By buying a second-hand car, you still get that expensive car, but without paying the depreciation and the cost. So say, for instance, this car is 2005. It cost me $250,000 3 years ago. And I think even now it's probably worth 230, maybe 240, maybe worth 220. So I reckon this is even conservative. So I'm saying the depreciation is 15 grand a year.
So the model is a 2005 model?
So it's 10 years old, but I reckon it's almost fully depreciated now. It's not going to go any lower. If anything, it could actually start rising in value because there aren't that many of them around the world.
Right.
So I reckon
it just bottoms out. It's not going to drop down to $100,000. That would never happen.
Yeah. So the original car price is $750,000.
Right, to buy brand new.
To buy it brand new. The new Aventadors are effectively $1 million. So if I bought this brand new at 750 grand, depreciation would be at least 150 grand a year. The interest bill at, say, call it 7%, put in whatever you want, is about 50. So that car will cost me 200 grand before I've driven it.
And that's the cost per year?
Per year.
$200,000
for the first
per
few
year.
years. because depreciation's higher in the first few years.
Right.
So quite often a car will depreciate 50% in the first 3 years. Whereas in my cost now, I reckon it's costing me 32 grand a year.
Just explain those numbers.
And because effectively, I reckon the car now, say, has cost me, say it's worth 210,000 or 205, it's gone down 15 grand a year. Plus the interest cost of 7% on 250, it's costing me 17 grand a year in interest cost. So it's costing me roughly 32 grand a year. So is it worth, sure, I'd love a brand new Lamborghini, but is it worth paying effectively 7 times more? Am I going to get 7 times more pleasure from it? Now, for most people, if you flick back to that picture, most people that don't know cars, that looks like a brand new Lamborghini. It looks a $750,000 car, because it is. It's just older. And so the people that know it's old, they don't care because they appreciate cars for what they are. If you're trying to be flash Harry around town and pretend you've got a brand new car, people will see through you. But I'm not trying to do that, and I put it on TV and put it on the internet. So people that love it say, well, no, it's a great car, why not? And so the whole thing about that's cheaper than a BMW, if we go back to the numbers, if you bought a brand new BMW for 250, sure, it would be a great BMW. But whether it's a BMW or a Mercedes, the chances are that'll depreciate by about 50% in 3 or 4 years. So I reckon that car would effectively be costing you $30,000 or $40,000 a year depreciation. It would still be costing you that interest bill, so you'd be paying about $60,000 or $70,000 in the first 3 years owning that brand new BMW, and you're still only driving a 250 grand car. So my argument, my justification for me buying the car, which justify it to the wife or the bank manager or the accountant or whoever I've got to do it to, is I would rather buy a 250 grand car that's really a 750 grand car because it's fully depreciated than drive a brand new car out of the garage that suddenly it's worth peanuts the next day.
And you've also got an interesting sign on the car. Explain that, and does that help to make it tax deductible?
Yeah, so I like to get my cars working for me. So I put my website on there. We probably get 50 to 100 photos a day. I park it in hotels right in the centre of town, and a lot of it's tourists and things like that, but it's all about being front of mind. So I just thought if you get a billboard in the middle of the city, it's going to cost you 20 grand a month or something like that. Whereas I could be driving this car for a few thousand a month and actually get pleasure out of it, whereas I wouldn't get it out of a billboard. And there's only one of these in the city I live in, and there's millions of billboards. So I actually get the car working for me. But no, unfortunately, the sign writing doesn't make it tax deductible, even though that's the first question everyone asks. But I think if it makes you money, whether it's tax deductible or not, who cares?